Hi guys, it's me again. Sorry I missed yesterday. Sometimes life is super demanding. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway, we are again reading my book, my small novella, Beldagar, A Dark Eve Story. For those who haven't been following along, we're on chapter 5 and 6. So if you haven't heard the other chapters, just find the video for number 1 and start there. Also, the link that I provided today is to my Amazon author site. So if you want to click on that, you will go to the Amazon page where all of my books are underneath my name. And there's actually a plus button that you can push. That means you follow me. And whenever I release a new book, Amazon will inform you. So it's super helpful for me. If you haven't heard anything about my book series, this is book 1. It's won a pretty little award, so has book 2. But if you want to start my book series, start with A New Recruit by T K Thompson, okay? And number 2, number 3, number 4. But right now, the books that are brand new are, like I said, Animar Warrior, book 4. So everyone go support, buy a book. And then this book goes with it. It's another novella, but it's a little thriller involving one of our favorite characters and sometimes our comedic relief, Vaster. And so he gets his own little thriller, and I really love this book. I just read it to one of my best friends here in Texas, and it was super fun to read it out loud to somebody. Anyway, she loved it, and my favorite chapter is To Tea and Suspicion. So when you get there to that chapter, let me know what you think, okay? Because it has a lot of interesting characters that I don't know where they came from, but they are awesome. Inga's probably one of my favorites in there. She is very crazy, and I just could picture them all so vividly as I wrote the book. Like I said, I wrote the book of Soliticus in 2 weeks, and I was kind of sad when it was over, but it was super fun. So go grab those 2 books and support my book launch right now. We're trying to get them good ratings on there. Anyway, and so we're going to continue reading Beldagar. We're on chapter 5. So if you remember the last chapters, Beldagar met Rose, right? And it was an interesting meeting. And then he meets this mystery lady who gives him all this information that he doesn't know how to process. And also a choice to be able to save Rose, okay? But he has to make a decision whether or not to accept her deal. And part of her deal is that he will actually kill the people who are responsible for all the evil going on around the village and the surrounding areas. Because whatever happens on the mountain, we don't really know what is going on up there, okay? All right, so chapter 5 is The Dilemma. Beldagar raced back to the village square, flying right past his house. The nag bellowed his name, but he was absolutely done with her and her wretched household. He enjoyed the freedom of speed with the wind whipping in his face. As he neared the square, he skidded to a halt. His feet dug deep into the earth. He twisted back, seeing the ground in fuzzy black and white. In a blink of an eye, the color returned, making him dizzy. The tents and wooden booths were almost all up, and people were starting to hang the banners and ribbons. Beldagar scoured the area for Rose. There were several other young women wearing the same white dresses. He snuck around the perimeter of the celebration, peeking into all the tents. Finally, he caught a glimpse of her entering a canvas tent at the other end of the festival grounds. Her bouncing curls gave her away. He snaked around, avoiding Thard, who moved purposefully, blocking all the easy routes. After crawling between some of the tents, he made it to the back of the one she was in. Softly, he picked up the back of the tan canvas and peeked in. She was once again sitting alone on a wooden crate this time, staring forlornly at the ground. Psst! He ducked under the canvas. Psst! With the fabric on his head and his end half still protruding out of the back of the tent, he needed to get inside before being discovered. It would be difficult explaining his purpose. Rose was in an unbreakable trance. Rose! Finally, she looked up, confused, and then over to the canvas wall. He popped his head in more so she could see him. Her eyes widened. What are you doing here? Her voice was filled with worry and suspicion, but a light grew in her eyes. I've come to tell you that I can save you, Beldagar spoke with hope, and yet a deep worry penetrated him. Rose tilted her head. No one can save me. He wiggled all the way inside, and Rose looked skittishly towards the tent opening. If someone finds you here, we could both be in great trouble, she warned him, moving to a closer crate. The room was full of them. Some were opened and had straw in them with ornate bowls and candlesticks. If I'm found with you all alone like this, it could mean serious punishment. They'll think I've been... She paused, glancing at him, embarrassed and shy. Deflowered. I'll be expendable to them. Beldagar furrowed his brow at her. You mean they'll take away your name? His mind could not grasp what she meant. Her eyes widened. Never mind, she said quickly. I can save you. She squinted hard, wrinkling her nose, but allowed him to continue. A sorceress has told me the truth about the mountain and the priest on top. It's all a hoax. He paused, letting her process the news, but her face stayed stoic. She says they worship the mountain because they think a god lives in it, but it's not a god, it's a dragon. While he spoke, he watched her expression. Eyebrows furrowed as he continued. She told me that it will soon wake up because of the miners in the mine. They've taken a lot of its gold from the mountain. Her perfectly full lips were pursed. How does this save me? He shook his head. She said she'll give me the power to save you. She'll give me the strength of 100, no, 1,000 men, so I can save you. His words rambled out. After hearing them himself, he only half believed them. Rose blinked her eyes several times. He grabbed her hand and she gasped lightly at his boldness. I promise you, I am not making this up. She appeared to me in the forest and disappeared before my eyes. Why would she do this? Beldagar sat back, feeling a sense of heaviness return. She's cursed. She says there's a family. His voice wavered. There's a family that cursed her. And they're the reason why we live the way we do. They keep us in ignorance to feed their greed. I have to do something to release her, and then she'll give me the strength. Do what exactly? Now, Rose was now suspicious. She jutted her chin out. He wished he had explained it differently. To admit what was being asked was deplorable, and he didn't want her to think badly of him for even considering it. She wants him dead. Shock widened her eyes. She pulled her hand away and looked to the ground. You would do that? Was she flattered or horrified? Beldagar shook his head. No, he sat back, still shaking his head, but doubt filled him. He didn't want to do it, but he also wanted to save her. I don't want to kill anyone. I want to save you. They stared at each other, and the problem only grew in the silence. If what they're doing is not right, isn't it fine for them to die? To release us all from a life that isn't good? How do you know this is all true? How do you judge that? He thought on this. The sorceress sounded genuine. I don't know. I don't know what to do. He took her hand again. Maybe we could just run away. The idea flooded him with elated hope. He could see the path before them clearly. He had the ability to live in the wild and take care of them. But would she agree to it? They'll find us, she said simply. He smiled, mostly inside, at her not rejecting being with him. But he also knew she spoke the truth, making him feel instantly defeated. If they were found, he could plead that it was entirely his fault, that he had kidnapped her and made her come. They would kill him for such an offense. Her soft voice drew him out of his worried thoughts. It's selfish. Would you really sacrifice someone else's life for what you want? A deplorable feeling overcame him. His gut sunk, making him feel dirty and unworthy to even be near her. His attention flickered back to an earlier portion of their conversation. Deflowered. The meaning popped into his mind, causing him to shake his head that he had not understood what she had meant. Deflowered, he spoke randomly. I get it. Then he raised his hands defensively. I would never do something like that. She blinked rapidly, silent. He sat up on his knees and looked her straight in the eyes. I'm sorry. He meant it wholeheartedly, afraid of scaring her off. The scratchy ground was hard beneath him. The canvas tent smelled musty. The wood from the crate smelled too. He wanted to grab a handful of straw to feel the texture. I'm not normally this dense. This was not true. He was normally a very mindless person. It's not because I'm not smart. It's that everything around me is so familiar, so repetitious, that I'm confused about it. I feel like I've felt everything and seen everything before, and my mind swirls around trying to make sense of it. Sometimes I can't pay enough attention to what's really going on around me. He sputtered, fearing she would dismiss him and leave. She squinted and then stared at the ground. He lowered his head, forlorn, until she grabbed his hands. She pulled him down to kneel with her. I feel the exact same way, she said. He shook his head, an electric validation shooting up his spine. He shifted his weight on his knees. It was the first time anyone had believed him. Her eyes beamed at him with such light he was afraid to blink and have it all disappear. What do I do? He asked. He needed her wisdom. He needed her to tell him what was right and wrong and what action to take. I don't know, she paused. I don't know that we can be happy based on other people's destruction. But what if they are bad? What if they are the reason so many girls have lost their lives and been, he paused, putting emphasis on the next word, deflowered. I will not lie to you. I fear for my life. I don't want to die. Her voice broke and her hand shook in his. But I can't, with good conscience, allow another to die, especially if they are innocent. Even though Beldagar thought the same, he couldn't lose her. Her words repeated in his head. It's selfish. What if they're not innocent? She debated whether this justified the acts. Then they are not innocent. Her answer left him with no resolve. The concerned furrowing of her brow told him she was in the same stuck place as he was. Let's think on this, he said. I'll try to find out more about the family. I'll meet you tomorrow night at the north end of the festival, right when It becomes too dark for anyone to see us, she agreed. He snuck back towards the canvas wall, but she stopped him shy of it and gave him a kiss on his cheek. The contact flushed his face instantly, and his heart pounded like a deep drum. He gave an embarrassed smile before crawling out. Okay, so that was chapter 5, The Dilemma. Dang it, I need a water. And I didn't get one. Sorry. So if my voice sounds kind of croaky, I'm sorry. Okay, we're on chapter 6, A Day of Decisions. Okay? The sun woke him the next morning, splaying through the meadow he had fallen asleep in. His stomach growled, physically moving his belly. It was bad timing on his own part leaving his home. The nag would be so angry without the opportunity to yell at him. But he knew the land well. It took him little time to gather nuts and berries from the forest. As he searched, he wrestled with the problems that faced him and Rose. He had one day to decide. He thought of going to see the family in question, but even if he could steal a horse and ride it 20 miles north, he would be searching for a needle in a haystack. No, he couldn't wander around looking for something and miss meeting Rose that night. Maybe he could inquire of some of the villagers about the family, but he wasn't on good terms with any of them. The people detested him, though he didn't quite know why. It didn't matter now that Rose was here either. He walked back toward the village, careful not to travel anywhere near his old home. He couldn't imagine the fit the nag would have if he did. The middle of the town burst with frivolity as the festival started. The next afternoon, Rose would be gone. He wandered, eyeing all the games and salivating over the goodies. The livestock pens were full, ready for their trip up the mountain. A few more steps past the pigs, a large pair of feet blocked his path. Slowly, his eyes moved up the thick timber legs and green pants to the yellowed shirt and suspenders, then to Thard's stern, bearded face. He was chewing on something and spit it out of the corner of his mouth. "Why are you here?" his hard voice asked. Beldagar glared right back without flinching. "I have a right to be here, if it's where I choose to be." He expected Thard to hit him, his preferred method of dealing with conflict. He hoped he would. A strange adrenaline pulsed inside his veins, waiting for the violence. "You're going to abandon the woman who supported your life?" Thard spoke of a duty the nag had no right to claim anymore. She had never acted toward Beldagar as a mother would towards a child. He knew that well after seeing the difference with her own children. He was just a burden to her, and now he was relieving her of that burden. "Just as much as I've decided to not be your punching bag anymore." Thard flinched in anger, a storm furrowing in his eyes. His face looked like it would burst in half, killing everyone around them. But he didn't do anything. It must have been all the eyes watching. Even so, Beldagar knew he now had to watch his back. Thard pushed past, almost knocking him down, but before moving on, he spoke over his shoulder. "Don't think you'll ever make it in this village." The words hurt, more than he wanted them to. Now he had no place in it, because he wouldn't be their slave. Thoughts of burning the whole thing to the ground felt justified. A dragon tearing it to pieces was even better. He didn't know what to do or where to go. He couldn't travel north and back. He couldn't go to work. He couldn't build a home here, and he needed to stay away from Rose and meet her in secret. Now that there wasn't anything for him to do, his former desires to be lazy felt daunting. Doing anything was better than nothing. He found himself walking north. The steps were all new. He'd hardly ventured far from the village borders, having never received time off from his work, even when he was sick. He could have been on his deathbed, and a broom would hit him on the way out the door. His feet shuffled against the hard dirt road. How long was it to the next village? A wagon rumbled ahead. Beldagar hailed the driver, and the wheels clattered to a halt. A very odd, skitty man with thin scruff on his face peered down through the dark shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. His eyes had a strange glare of an animal in the night. His face looked horribly mean. "Sir," Beldagar said, "do you know of a family living just north of here?" The wagon man diverted his stern gaze to the road ahead. For a moment, Beldagar expected him to strike the reins and move along without a word. "I just heard of them. I just heard of them and wondered what they were like," he continued, realizing after he said it that it sounded ridiculous. Finally, the man opened his mouth, showing ugly, rotted teeth. "Nobody goes to see the family." His words were firm. He flicked the reins, continuing forward. Beldagar staggered back from the moving wagon. The family? Nobody sees the family? They didn't seem very neighborly, especially if nobody was allowed to see them. What were his odds of being able to see them if he managed to make it there? He peered up and down the road. He continued forward, but sooner or later he would have to turn back. The wagon slowly rattled away. He didn't want the driver to think he had given up, which he had, but he needed the illusion to maintain his pride. After waiting a couple of minutes, a hopeful feeling rushed him. He couldn't just give up. The road snaked through the tall pines. Everything was light and airy, but his mind wandered back to Rose and his problem. His vision went black and white again, losing all the color of the earth. As he picked up his foot, he was no longer wearing his mangled boots, but a strange pair of strap leather sandals. Strange clothes draped off him, too. In a blink of an eye, his very surroundings transformed. Heat radiated from the ground, flushing his face. Sweat dripped down his forehead, and he wiped it clean with his arm. Sand flooded out of his sandals, covering the ground, making the forest scenery disappear. He lifted his feet, feeling the weight. The trees fell to the ground with the force of the sand, and large dunes sprung up. The sun clung to the height of the sky, pushing down on him. He sheltered his eyes. His hands and arms were dark, calloused and scabbed. The harsh, hot wind blew through him, making it hard to breathe. In the dust-filled air, he saw a woman's figure. A sweet voice echoed with the wind, and he caught sight of her eyes. Those sparkling blue eyes were the only color against the sand. Rose. He turned around, and clay brick walls towered over his head. The alleys were narrow, and he could hear the buzz of people moving and talking in a marketplace. He ventured down the hard dirt pathway, but always found another wall with another back way. Small square windows stood at the top of the tall brick buildings. He swore that shadowed figures looked down on him, just out of sight within the dark frames. The buzzing grew louder as his steps quickened, but more walls appeared. He ran, coaxing himself that the end would come. A scream pierced the air, skidding him to a halt. Rose. His heart vibrated, panicking. In a quick blink, the strange vision was gone. The trees and earth were back to normal. His head went fuzzy and his vision swirled as color burst back into view. He let go of his head and shook it several times. What was going on? He was going crazy. But he had thought this his entire life. Shuffling sounded from ahead. He jumped off the path behind the trees. Why had he done that? Around the bend, someone was coming. It was a woman just older than him, carrying a bushel of sticks. She was very plain, with thin brown hair that fell past her shoulders. He blinked. There was something familiar about her as well, but he couldn't pinpoint it. He stepped out onto the road as she drew near. She jolted back and scowled. "What are you doing? Trying to scare me to death?" she barked and continued forward. "I'm sorry," he said. "I was just heading up the road looking for someone. Could you help me?" He noted her slender, soft arms and squinted. They were out of place for someone who carried loads of sticks everywhere. She stopped and glared. "I'm looking for the family." He used the same emphasis as the wagon man, hoping it would signal exactly what he wanted. Both her eyebrows shot up. "The family? You are going to see the family." Her use of the phrase made his mind whirl. It was an odd way of talking about someone, so impersonal. He could have been talking about any family, but obviously it was not the family of the Glen or the family Smith. It was just the family. Beldagar shook his head, clearing his confusion. "Yes. Could you tell me where to find them?" He looked ahead. She puckered her lips. "You don't see the family unless the family summons you. And in that case," she paused, glaring at him, "you are taken." That obstacle dampened his resolve. "Why?" he asked, his temper rising. She glared. "You're obviously not worthy, so you couldn't possibly understand." His mind whirled. Not worthy? Did this have to do with the mountain and the festival? She shook her head pitifully, and he swore there was a glint of something in her eyes before she deserted him, heading on to his village. Beldagar watched her leave, his mind preoccupied with their conversation and his gut suspicious. He tried to pinpoint what he didn't like about her. Shaking his head, he rubbed his eyes. A pounding headache was coming on. He couldn't even get help finding the family. More and more, he had to consider that they were what the sorceress said. He turned back, abandoning his course. What choice did he have? No one was going to help him. He had no idea where to go. But even with all the excuses, failure flooded him. He was giving up, and that didn't sit well. As darkness blanketed the sky, the stars appeared. He covertly made his way over to the north side of the village and stalked the base of a big pine. His mind was worse than ever as a flood of questions demanded his attention. He didn't even hear Rose sneak up until she grabbed his shoulder, scaring the breath right out of him. "Ah!" He spun around, noting the worry plastered on her face. "I'm sorry." He leaned, an arm against the tree, catching his breath. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." Her blue eyes sparkled sincerely. He couldn't imagine her ever doing anything wrong. "No," he stepped closer. "I wasn't paying attention." She nodded. "Did you find out anything?" He shook his head, sorry that he hadn't tried more. "No, I had no way of getting to them. I did travel up the road a ways." Her eyes widened. "I ran into a man and a woman. I asked them both about the family." He paused, feeling like an utter failure. The man said that no... Sorry. The man said that no one goes to see the family. He added extra emphasis. "No one sees the family?" She scowled at the ground. "How would he even know what you were talking about unless they really were something?" "Great. But we still don't know anything about them." His statement made them both hunch despondently. "What about the woman?" "She was the same, except even worse. She said no one sees the family unless you're summoned, and in that case, you're taken to them. She said that I couldn't understand because I wasn't worthy. Worthy? I'm worthy, Rose balled her fist. I have no idea about any of this. I'm going up the mountain. You're just the same as the rest of them. He felt her anger and hopelessness. What should I do? He begged, hoping for insight. I don't know, her mind simmered. He took her small hand. I can't let them take you. You can't kill to have what you want, she said clearly. Even I can't bear that consequence. Maybe if I talk to the sorceress, she'll let me see the evil of the family first. He was reaching for anything to fix the situation. I can't lose you again. Rose jerked back. What do you mean? His head was fuzzy. He tried to shake it away. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm going to figure this out. You must trust me. She looked his face over with worry. I do. He wished her answer had more hope. He kicked himself for not continuing forward earlier. Even if all his excuses were true, he should have tried to the very last possible minute. He was letting her down. As he turned away, her hand stopped him. He came back, and she took a small step forward, raising on her tippy toes. Beldagar sucked in his breath as she inched closer. Are you going to kiss me? Her voice was soft, and her lips gently pressed with innocent intentions. The moonlight glowed on her face. He tenderly grabbed her arms. As much as he wanted to sweep her up, he froze. I'm afraid, he admitted. Her hair brushed against his chin as she looked down. Why? Because if I don't succeed, I don't know if I'll be able to live with myself. His heart throbbed. The sweet scent of her hair lulled him to reconsider, but a great halting feeling stopped him. She stepped back, and an awkward tension built. I understand. I can't ask you to do what will bring more harm to yourself. His heart was breaking. She turned, fading away back to the festival camps. He wanted to stop her. A strength deep within his core pulled him back. Don't make promises you can't keep. He wanted to do everything he could to save her life, but his heart drummed with the heavy reality that it might be impossible. Okay, that is chapter 6. Tomorrow, I'll do better and read tomorrow, so we don't have to do 2 chapter 2. But I don't know, you guys might be liking the 2 chapter thing. But the next chapter is chapter 7, the family. So I guess we'll actually get to meet the family. Anyway, I hope you guys are enjoying Beldagar, okay? Ooh, sorry, kicked my stand. And we will continue. Again, go to the link that I provided and you will go directly to Amazon to my author site. These 2 books are new in my series, but if you haven't started, all my other books should be on there as well. And I'm so grateful for you guys and your willingness to show up. Thank you. So we will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day, okay?